Welcome in. Today, we're talking about Oklahoma, the Sooners. We're giving predictions for their season. Let's do it. Welcome into the show. And today, like I said, we're going to be talking about the Oklahoma Sooners. So we're continuing our season predictions and kind of going through various schools as we kind of get ready for fall as it approaches. I mean, we're getting really close to the season coming in. So Oklahoma, 11-2 a year ago, 7-2 in the Big 12. A new coach, Brent Venables, coming in, a brand new offense. Jeff Lebby's coming in. Dillon Gabriel is now the quarterback for the Sooners, transferring from UCF. Spencer Rattler, Caleb Williams, Lincoln Riley, all out. All of them are gone. And now it's just a brand new look and a brand new feel, really, for the Oklahoma program. And so, like I said, Dillon Gabriel's in, Jeff Lebby are in. They were together at UCF in 2019. They averaged 43.5 points per game. Really remarkable. I mean, they had a great year. I think Gabriel really kind of took the reins in that offense. And Jeff Lebby, we've seen over his career, I mean, he's always had a productive offense. And so I expect that to continue at Oklahoma. As far as the offensive line goes, I think a lot of people have made a big deal about the 33 sacks a year ago. And while that is true, you know, it is a concern. 33 sacks is a lot. I would say there's two factors. First of all, 11 of those sacks came against Baylor and Oklahoma State. So a third of them came against just those two teams. And then secondly, Caleb Williams. And while Caleb Williams is an extremely talented player, the guy absolutely took some sacks last year that he didn't have to take by running around, scrambling, trying to make a play. At times it helped Oklahoma, and at times it really hurt them and their offensive flow. On the offensive line, they returned some guys up front, three of the starters, including a guy who I expect to have a huge jump this year, Andrew Rame, at the center position. He's older. They've developed him, and I think he's going to be a really good player, potentially an all-conference type selection. They also added McCade Matwire out of Cal. He graded really well in PFF, so I expect him to come in and have a role. And yeah, I expect the offensive line to be better. It's another year of development. It's another year of growth, and they were pretty young a year ago outside of the guys that they lost last season. Moving on to running back, you know, Eric Gray was a guy that got a lot of hype going into last year, and he never really lived up to the bill. But I think this year he's going to take a big step in the right direction. Marcus Major is there as well. Four-star freshman Javonte Burns, he'll factor into the running back group as well. But I think Eric Gray is going to have a really special season for the Sooners this year. And we know Jeff Lebby likes to use the run game. He's going to use his quarterback a ton, obviously, but he's going to want to run the football. And I do think Eric Gray can be pretty special in the running game, but also as a receiver. I mean, the guy's really talented. He gets it done in kick return and punt return. I just think he's a special athlete and a dynamic player for this offense. Moving on to wide receiver, and probably the group that I feel like people aren't talking about enough. Everyone knows Marvin Mims. He's a terrific player, very special, gets it done in the intermediate routes, but more so in the short routes and the deep routes. He's just fantastic and creates a lot of explosive plays for the offense. But people don't talk about the fact that they didn't have Theo Weiss a year ago. The former five-star prospect is an absolute game changer for them. I think he's more of a legit wide receiver one for the offense as far as a contested catch type guy. He's going to free up a lot of room for Marvin Mims on the outside and also allow them to use Marvin in more creative ways than they have in the past. They've had to use him as a legit wide receiver one, which obviously he can do, but I think they can use more specialized packages to really get him involved while allowing Theo Weiss to kind of be a true wide receiver one on the outside. You also added Arizona State transfer LV Bunkley Shelton. Big pickup. Just more depth, a guy that's a proven commodity at the Power 5 level. I think he's really going to help that group, especially depth-wise, as I mentioned. Moving on to the defensive side, so you add Brent Venables, and guys, I'm telling you, there's a reason to be excited about Brent Venables, and here's why. So first season as defense coordinator in 1999 at Oklahoma, the defense went from 33rd to 20th in one season, and then the next year they went all the way up to 5th in the entire country. Then at Clemson in 2012, they went from 81st to 48th in one season, and then all the way to 24th the next season. I think that's a big deal. Oklahoma was 60th a year ago. I think based on his track record, you're probably looking at a top 30 defense this year. Now, top 20, that's probably a stretch, but I think top 30 is a pretty safe bet when you're adding a guy like Brent Venables, along with the talent that they have on the depth chart as well. You're talking about Jaden Redmond coming back. He'll probably be their best defensive lineman, but also Tulane transfer Jeffrey Johnson. He should factor in very nicely up front as well. Deshaun White, David Ugwogbu, and Appalachian State transfer TD Roof will kind of anchor the linebacking group. Ugwogbu, a great pass rusher as well. I expect him to really show more of that this upcoming season. Secondary is interesting. They lose a lot, but they have a lot of talent. So a guy like Billy Bowman and Key Lawrence, I think will factor in very nicely. I think Woody Washington is a pretty good cornerback along with Devin Graham. So I think they'll figure it out, right? And maybe this will take some time, but I think at the end of the day, you have to trust what Brent Venables has done in the past, and I think that'll tell you what he's going to do for the future. Moving on to the schedule, and the schedule, I mean, guys, this is... I tweeted about this week. I feel like a lot of people are sleeping on Oklahoma because it's that first-year head coach syndrome. That's real. It's also just a loss of talent. They're worried about Dylan Gabriel getting hurt, and then who's the backup? I understand all of that. I understand that there are concerns, but look at their schedule. And I think you'll find some pretty easy wins, and you'll also find a very generous schedule on the docket. So the top 5 teams in the Big 12 preseason-wise were Baylor, Oklahoma State, Kansas State, and Texas. They get all of those teams at home or on a neutral site. That's massive. I don't see a for sure loss on this schedule. I see a few close calls, but no for sure losses. So looking at the wins, UTEP, Kent State, at TCU, Kansas, at Iowa State, at Texas Tech, and yes, at Nebraska. I know a lot of people have kind of talked about Nebraska as being a dark horse this year. Well, they haven't won more than 5 games since 2017. So I'm not betting on them to beat an Oklahoma team, whether or not they have a first-year coach or not. And even though they played them close a year ago, still not worried about it. Oklahoma should win that game. Close calls that I have on their schedule: Baylor, Kansas State, Oklahoma State, Texas, at West Virginia. The reason the at West Virginia game is sneaky is because it's in Morgantown, and also it's in between Baylor and Oklahoma State. So Oklahoma's going to have to really get up for that game if they're going to have any hope of winning it. But overall, I mean, this schedule sets up really, really well for them. The over-under right now is 9.5. That's pretty lofty expectations for any program. 9.5 means in order to cover, you have to get 10 wins. While that's lofty, I think that that's the safer bet for this season for Oklahoma. I think 10-2 or 11-1 are far more likely than 9-3 for this team. They're too talented. They have too many things that are trending in the right direction. And even though many people think it'll take a year for Brent Venables to get it right, I think this schedule sets up for them to win right now. And the last time Oklahoma brought in a first-year head coach, it was Lincoln Riley, and he went 12-2 his first year with the Sooners. So I'm believing Brent Venables will have a nice time at Oklahoma. I think they're going to have a really solid year and will be contending for a Big 12 championship and potentially for a college football playoff berth if everything goes right for the Sooners this season. But for today, that's all. I'll talk to you later this week. We're going to have more season predictions. This is Bedlam week. So later on in the week, I'm going to have an Oklahoma State prediction as well as I just did the Sooners today. But I'll talk to you later in the week.